Hey everybody, happy Friday, March 2nd. Man, I am so glad it's Friday, TGIF. Thank you guys for tuning in. Let us know you can hear us and see us. It's the TED Show, episode 131 you are today, Henry. And this is my friend Henry Lim. Say hi, Henry.
Hi, Henry.
I deserve that. We've had a great time. Henry got here early enough for us to have a fantastic conversation, but when you guys pop on, if you'll just let me know you can hear us and see us. Hap, you're on. Commissioner McMullen, very nice of you to join us. Do you know Hap? He's awesome. He was just on the show. But let us know you can hear us and see us. That would be really helpful. Gert, let us know. Just give us the thumbs up. Clay says hello, Henry, so that must mean we can hear. Hey, yeah. Clay. All right, so welcome. Hey, Clay. See, he said hi to me too. Welcome to the show, and thank you for taking time out. You've got a big day today. You have Pachaka-cha. Did I say it right this time?
Yes, you did.
Pachaka-cha. He's got that tonight, so Henry was gracious enough to come today. Thanks, Larry. Appreciate it. But I was having a conversation with my friends Donald and Bill, and they brought up DACA. And this is how this whole thing came about. I always wanted to have Henry on the show, but DACA came up, and I was so stupid and uninformed about what DACA means and about the impact that it has or could have. And there were a whole bunch of things going on with the Supreme Court that had to do with immigration. And I thought, who is the best person I can reach out to? And I thought of Henry immediately, because Henry is an immigration attorney amongst other things. And so that's why Henry's here. So thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Ted.
So give them a little history on you. We'll eventually dive into DACA and what's going on with it. But give us a little history on you. I loved your bio.
Oh, thank you.
It was really awesome.
Thank you. Well, I'm from Nicaragua. The last name is Chinese, but I'm actually Hispanic. I was born in Nicaragua. My grandfather was Chinese, and when they moved over to Nicaragua, that's where my parents met. And we actually moved over to the States when I was 7 years old. And when I was 9 is when I found out that I was undocumented. So I had to grow up with that throughout my life, and the struggles that had such a profound impact on me that I wanted to help people, and that's why I became an immigration attorney about 20 years ago. It'll be 20 years this year. So I've been practicing immigration law exclusively for the last 20 years, helping people stay together with their families, reunite with their families, or even start new lives over here through investment vehicles and different other methods.
So what does it mean to be undocumented? That means that your parents didn't come in, didn't become U.S. citizens. Nobody knew they were here. Is that what undocumented means?
Well, undocumented means that you don't have the legal right to remain in the United States.
Okay.
Be it for one reason or another. A lot of people associate undocumented with illegal border crossings. But the majority of people undocumented in the United States actually come through airplane, and they actually come through legal means into the United States. In fact, it's about 66% of people who are undocumented today entered through an airplane, were inspected by immigration, and they just simply overstayed their visas. I'll give you an example as to why my family did it. Is because they were facing civil war in Nicaragua in 1981. My aunt, for example, fled under gunfire.
Wow.
My dad had a gun to his head, and it's been it was quite a challenging time.
Sure.
And so we were escaping civil war like many people do. For example, what we're seeing right now are a lot of people from Venezuela who are escaping the nightmare that is going on in that country, because there's simply not a sustainable type of environment for people to even live over there.
We barely talk about that mainstream media anymore, which I find fascinating. I have a lot of friends that will post stuff on social media. Thank God for social media in that respect, because you get to see videos of what's going on down in Venezuela, but we don't hear it a lot on mainstream news. And I can't figure out why, because it's a huge, huge story and a huge issue.
Right, and it's, get this, there's a zoo in Venezuela that has 300 animals. 80 of them are carnivores. They're actually feeding the non-carnivores to the carnivores because they don't have even food for the animals at the zoo.
Wow.
You can see the bones on the lions and the animals there, and the people don't have food, much less food for the animals at zoos. So it's incredible what's going on.
So you're seeing a lot of influx from people from Venezuela.
Yes, right now it is probably the most, at least in this community in Central Florida, we are seeing a lot of influx from Venezuela and some South American countries, but more Venezuelan than anything else right now.
So as an undocumented person here, then you have to realize you have to go through the system. Eventually you did. You've become a U.S. citizen, obviously. We wouldn't have him on the show. We'd have a bag over his head or something if we had to hide his identity. But you went through all of the process to become a U.S. citizen. How long ago was that?
It took 14 years. I came here when I was 7, and my situation was squared away around the time that I was 21. So it was quite a long time. And
was the process crazy for you? Was it?
Absolutely. A lot of it had to do with, unfortunately, bad representation. And we found this out along the way, which is what motivated me to become an attorney and practice immigration law. I knew I wanted to become an attorney. I like to argue, but
I haven't seen that side of you yet. I like it though.
But while in law school, I decided I really want to do immigration because I want to protect people and prevent them from going through what I went through, at least to try to ease some of that burden.
Sure, because it's scary. You're here. You obviously don't want to go back. You can't go back. You couldn't have gone back to Nicaragua without threat of all of the stuff that was going on there. Right. And you have to maneuver through a system that is definitely has its faults, even though it is there. I know there's a lot of things that are being done positive in the system. I get it. But it can be a scary, difficult thing for someone who's new to the country to try to go through.
Right, and you mentioned that this show was going to be about DACA, and we'll talk about what that actually means, but just think about this. I came here when I was 7 years old. At 7 years old, you're not going to ask your parents, hey, do you have a visa to come to the country?
Right.
Why are we overstaying the visa? You don't have that kind of control. And that's why the arguments and the positions that we see today politically, is very politically charged towards these DACA, these dreamers. These people had no choice when they came in, and a lot of them came in before they were even 1 or 2 years old.
Right. So that was what was interesting. So let's talk about DACA. I told Henry earlier that I purposefully did not do any research because when I was having the discussion with my friends, we're back. I didn't know what DACA stood for. I had absolutely no idea what it stood for. So can you give us what the initials stand for, what DACA actually stands for, and then give us a little history about it?
Oh, absolutely. DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. That's the acronym for DACA. Now, what the history behind it is, there's been a push in Congress to pass protection for dreamers. And dreamers are people who entered here through no fault of their own as children. They have been educated here, they've developed their talents here, and they established their whole lives here. They don't know any other country but the United States. So these dreamers were looking for some sort of relief. Congress failed to provide that relief for the dreamers. There were various attempts during the W. Bush administration. There was a push towards the Obama administration, and when Obama couldn't get it done, well, he used the deferred action powers that he has under the executive authority to issue deferred action for childhood arrivals. Now, there's guidelines that one must meet in order to qualify, and those guidelines are that you were physically present in the United States before June of 2007. You have to be over 15 years old. You can't have a criminal record in the sense of a felony conviction. If you have a felony conviction, you're disqualified for DACA. If you have 3 misdemeanors, you're disqualified for DACA. Or if you even have 1 significant misdemeanor, you're disqualified for DACA. So you don't get these benefits by being a criminal. And that's something that some media tends to push, that, oh, why are we letting all these gang members and all these criminals in? No, they don't qualify for DACA if they're like that. You have to show that you've been here, then you enter the United States before June 2007, and then you entered as a child, basically, that you were under 16 when you entered. So these are the basic requirements, and you also have to be under 31 when it was initially allowed. So those are the basic requirements. It's not for everyone. We have about 700,000 individuals under the DACA program. Now, what DACA does is it provides these individuals with a work authorization for a period of 2 years. What it also did, because it doesn't do this anymore, it would allow advanced parole, which was a travel document to be able to travel back and forth. That was disallowed under President Trump's announcements of 6 months ago. So, but this is what it did. It provided them for protection from deportation, and allowed them to have work permits so that they can go ahead and continue to go to school here and continue to work here. And we have many people under DACA serving our military. That we have people under DACA serving Fortune 500 companies. That's why big companies like Apple and Google, they're behind the push for us to go ahead and have DACA.
So Dennis says, I had a feeling Dennis would pop in. Hey Dennis, main issue conservatives like myself have with DACA is the domino effect we see down the road. If DACA approved, can pro-amnesty types honestly say they will allow DACA parents to go back home? If DACA kids are innocent, their parents surely aren't.
Well, that's why there have been several proposals, and I believe that there have been reasonable proposals. For example, the last Senate proposal that was turned down by President Trump included a provision that would disallow for DACA recipients who would eventually have to go through the system a long process of 12 years from petitioning for their parents. So there are protections that can be put in place to prevent the domino effect that you fear. And we also must be careful about going down a slippery slope type of logic, because what we're dealing with right now is not the parents. We're dealing with the dreamers. No one right now under this debate that's going on in our political sphere is talking about the parents. We're talking about the children right now. And yes, that is a legitimate concern that you bring up, because it was the parents' fault to bring them in here. And what the solution to that would be, well, let's disallow for these individuals, if they get it this way, from being able to petition for their parents. I'll give you an example of something similar that does happen. If someone gets adopted, for example, and they get adopted by U.S. citizens, well, that adopted child can get benefits through their adoptive parents. But that child cannot thereafter go and get sponsored their biological parents. It's disallowed, because their parents now are the adoptive parents. So there is precedence to establish this kind of system that would be a reasonable compromise. So what my hope is that we get away from these talking points, that we get away from this logic from the far left and the far right, and let's come to a meeting ground in the middle so that we do offer some sort of protection for these individuals.
Let's just see. So one of the things when I was having the initial conversation, what I couldn't wrap my head around was, so if you came here you're 2 years old, undocumented, you've come through, you have been here, this is the only country that you know, and you grew up here, and then what was happening with that? Why was that such a big deal? Were they trying to send even people who had been here since they were 2 back to the country, back to their country of origin? That's what I kept hearing that, a lot of chatter about that. So can you tell what the actual rule is on that? If you came here undocumented at 2 years old and you haven't become a U.S. citizen yet, what's going on with them? Are they under the fear of threat? How does that work?
Well, 6 months ago, President Trump announced an end to DACA. Now that decision has been challenged in the federal courts. And in the federal courts, what the rulings have held is that we must continue the process of DACA for the time being. There's a lot of litigation involved. So for the time being, the people who were under DACA are able to renew their DACA for their protections under DACA. They're not receiving new applications. So if you didn't apply before for one reason or another, then you're not eligible to file now. What was also stripped under President Trump's provision that has not been restored is the possibility to obtain an advanced parole. Now, I will tell people that the advanced parole is to me, the most important aspect of DACA. Not only programs like DACA, but also programs like TPS, Temporary Protected Status. And we've seen this administration end TPS for a host of countries. So the most important thing is the advanced parole. And the reason for the advanced parole is that it allows people to leave the country and come back legally so that they can have an avenue for relief. See, part of the problem with the immigration laws today are the severe punishments for people who leave the United States who try to do it the right way. There's not an incentive for people to try to do it the right way, because as soon as they leave, there's an immediate penalty for most people of 10 years that they can't come back. So even if you're trying to do it the right way, it becomes very, very problematic for you to do that. If, for example, you're married and the only way to do it is to leave, And if you leave, you get stuck for 10 years. What's going to happen to your family back home?
When you say leave, so explain that a little more. So what's going on? They leave the country because that's part of the process?
Well, part of I'll give you an example. Let's say that you're married, okay? And your spouse entered without document, was a dreamer, let's say. And they entered without documents. Well, even though you're a U.S. citizen and you petition for your spouse, that spouse, because they entered unlawfully, even though it was as a child, they still have to depart the United States. And the problem is that if they've spent more than a year on an undocumented status here, the moment they step foot on that airplane, they subject themselves to a 10-year penalty where they can't come back.
Wow.
Now, there's some things that we can try to do, but none of that is guaranteed. So the laws today do not provide an incentive for people to try to do it the right way. I hear the arguments from the right that say, well, get in line, do it the right way, come in the right way. But if you further and further restrict the ways to do it the right way to the point where it becomes impossible to do it the right way, do you actually want people to do it, or are you simply opposed to immigrants in the first place?
Do you feel people are really opposed to immigrants? I'm fascinated by that because you do hear that a lot.
Oh, yes. The administration right now is seeking to cut legal immigration by about half of the number of people who come in.
Is the thought process on that because they feel like it's a place for terrorists to get through? Is it all terrorist based? What's the rationale on that side?
Well, there's a lot of different types of rationale. One of the rationales is that they want to restrict people. A lot of it is protectionism. They feel that immigrants come here to take jobs. They feel a fear of the change. However, all of the independent studies show that immigration actually spurs the economy. The immigrants tend to be entrepreneurial, providing jobs. In fact, companies like Coors, Budweiser, Google, P&G, all these were founded or co-founded by immigrants. They provide talent to this country and provide jobs to this country. In fact, there was a study, I believe, out of every 10 new businesses, 6 come from a Hispanic background.
Wow.
So you have a overwhelming entrepreneurial spirit, and this spirit provides jobs to the country, not to take them away. Another interesting statistic is that people say, well, they come here to take up our resources. Well, that's simply not the case. Undocumented immigrants are not eligible for federal resources that are considered non-emergency. They can't get welfare. They can't get food stamps. They're not eligible on a federal level to get these sort of benefits. So what happens is that these individuals, they still work here, and they still provide into the Social Security fund. In fact, they provide $13 billion into the Social Security fund, and they only take out $1 billion. So those are the real facts on the ground today.
So tell me how somebody can stay undocumented, work, go through the military, because there's been stories about that. Like, where is this glitch in the system that isn't either catching them or they're not able, and by catching them, I mean catching the fact that they've just served in our military, they've applied for things, they're doing things in our country undocumented, and at some point, isn't there supposed to be a catch in the system where they go, okay, you've done it for this number of years, you need to get this, this, and this done? Like, how does that work? Like, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, well, how did somebody go through all that, pay into Social Security, become a veteran, and still is an undocumented person?
Well, let's be careful about the military, because in order to be in the military, you do have to show some sort of documentation. That's a separate case. What we hear from the military are the people who are on DACA, who are actually in some sort of status right now before they can actually serve there or in other first responder type of jobs. But you have undocumented immigrants who come in and they say, I want a job, and the employer takes, they're cut out of their checks and sends it over to Social Security. But at the end of the day, that immigrant can't collect. What happens for example, from the person who has been here with TPS, the temporary protected status that the president just announced a few months back that he is terminating? Well, we have individuals who, under TPS, created businesses. They've been here for 11 years creating that business. Well, what's going to happen now that TPS ends and this person has to leave? what's going to happen to that business? What's going to happen to the American employees of that business?
Are they giving them time to, when TPS ends or whenever that happens, are they giving them time to then apply and do what they need to do in order to stay? Are there extenuating circumstances? I'm asking questions literally because off the top of my head I can't figure out. So let's say they end the program, which seems interesting to me. They end the protective status. That's what TPS is, right?
Correct.
So they end the protective status. They're here. They've been a business owner for 11 years. Do then they now have time before they get shipped back to whatever country it is that they're from?
Well, now is the time. I mean, that's why the president announced it, so that when the cutoff date comes, that's it. It ends. Unless Congress passes some sort of provision to protect these individuals, it's going to end. And at that point, they become subject to deportation again, because that's what the temporary protected status does. It protects them from deportation.
Right.
So, I mean, I saw one of the comments earlier. It says that it shouldn't be easy to get American citizenship because it's so valuable. And I agree, it shouldn't be easy, but it also shouldn't be impossible. And because that's what it seems like this administration and our current laws as they exist today seem to be going towards. It's making it absolutely impossible to do it the right way. When you give somebody a choice of, well, if you want to do it the right way, you have to separate from your loved one for 10 years. Is that really who we are as a country? Is that the message that we want to send to people, that we are that heartless of a country, that we are willing to break up families?
I guess I'm just surprised by that. Again, not knowing enough, and that's why I love this conversation, because I'm learning. That seems completely illogical. I don't know who would. I'm trying to figure out the people that would be against that or for that separation, what the rationale might be.
Well, part of the rationale is that they want to try to do it the right. That they should be trying to do it the right way. That they want people to obey the laws, and I respect that. I absolutely respect that position. And the thing about that is that yes, there are arguments for that side, but the thing is that we should have a humanistic approach to this as well. We determine who we are as a country. I hear the arguments of it's supposed to be temporary protected status. Yes, I agree, it's supposed to be temporary. But these individuals, there's also a reality. It's not just what's on paper. There's a reality to life. And there's a reality when you reestablish yourself in a country and you develop ties to this country, you develop ties to your church, you develop ties to your neighbors, you're providing jobs to your neighbors. And to one day all of a sudden say, well, now you're no longer valued in this country. I refuse to accept that that's what America's about.
Well, tell me about, so on the TP, I agree. It's a fascinating discussion because you obviously have people that are very passionate about it on both sides of the issue. So let's talk about TPS just a little bit. Mm-hmm. Tell me, when people go in and they apply and they're granted TPS, is there something in the process where they're told, okay, so this TPS lasts for XYZ, and in that time frame you have to get citizenship?
Well, yes, it's in the name of the actual application. It's temporary protected status. And it does fall upon the individual to seek more permanent solutions. And the beauty of TPS is that it very well could provide those avenues if you become informed. The problem is there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Right.
And a lot of people fall prey to people calling themselves immigration experts, or they fall prey to people who just scam. Scams are a big problem in the immigration industry. Unfortunately, the desperation that this immigration issue brings, a desperation I know personally, causes people to depend on others who may not have the best interests in mind for that individual.
Well, sure, I imagine you're in a place of fear. You're stressed out. You're worried about staying in the States. You don't want to be deported or sent back to where you're from. And so there's a lot of people who can smell that kind of blood and fear and capitalize on it. I have no doubt in my mind. I see that a lot in all of the industries when you've got, especially if you've got a language barrier and you don't speak a lot of English, or a lot of times they're taken advantage of by their own language people, their own people. And I find that fast. I see that a lot on the real estate side all the time, actually, where people are getting misinformation, and it's mainly because they are trusting someone that they shouldn't be trusting at that moment. Because this is really life or death for a lot of people. You can't be sent. You wouldn't want to be sent back to Venezuela right now. And if you were, so tell me about the dreamer part. I'm going to get back to that. Where does the dreamer come in?
Well, the dreamer, again, is the individual who was brought here through no fault of their own by their parents when they were a minor, basically.
So that's something that we created to call basically the children that came over that are here and were brought here when they were children.
Correct, okay. Correct. Because we're talking about individuals who have gone through the educational system here. For example, something that perhaps would be they develop their talents here. They've been educated here, and they have aspirations. Like, I remember going through school, and I said, okay, well, I'm a straight A student. What's going to happen at the end of the day? What's going to happen now that I have this deportation order? Right. And you know, you have dreams, you have aspirations, and you're just asking for a shot. And because this is the only place that you know and love, because dreamers do love this country. I love this country. I was at a point where I was ready to join the Marines coming out of high school because I wanted to fight for this country, but I wasn't allowed to because of my immigration status at that time. Oh. So that is the love that dreamers have for this country, and we want to develop those talents here. How wise is it of a country to turn these people away, people who have talents here, and turn them away so that they can use those talents and now compete against us? Right. It doesn't make economic sense.
Agreed. So let me ask you, is there any truth to, because this is an argument I get or I hear from the other side of the coin. Mm-hmm. Well, they've been here since they were 2. They only know this country, and we're going to ship them back to a country that they don't know anything about. Is that accurate? Can that actually happen, or is that just more media stuff, propaganda?
No, it happens.
Okay, so that's fascinating to me. Talk about that, because that is probably the most difficult thing for me to wrap my head around, is that if you were brought here as a 2-year-old, and this is the only country you've ever lived in, how we can just send you back, humanitarian speaking, as a human being, I find that there's got to be a better way to handle this. It doesn't feel like they should be sent back. Even if they haven't gone through every single channel, they've still been here since they were 2. And I don't understand what the thought process is. Well, so that's a reality.
Well, correct. And the thing about it is that we are still a country of laws. And that's why I can respect the other side, because we are still a country of laws, and we're not advocating for open borders. That is not what this is about. It's about protecting our border. It's about protecting our interests as Americans, as a sovereign nation, but at the same time deal with the issue on a humanitarian level, knowing that this affects people on the ground living in this country today. That is the compromise where we should be at. There was a comment earlier, I wish this wasn't a partisan issue. So do I, because I can see things from both sides. I can see merit from both sides, and I do believe that there is a common sense solution in a comprehensive fashion. The problem is, do we have the political will to come up with those solutions? For example, most recently with DACA, there was a very reasonable proposal put in place by the Senate that was rejected. Now, I'm reading there that the DACA are rarely deported. Well, that's because they're under DACA. They're still validly in status. So that's why they're not deported. That's what DACA does. It prevents them from being deported. Now, a lot of these individuals, are working hard here. That is true, and they're oftentimes they're doing jobs that Americans, quite frankly, don't want to do. I mean, we have companies, for example, who have, say, 100 employees, and after an ICE raid, they lost half of their workforce. Now, they haven't been able to replace that workforce. They've looked for it, but they haven't been able to replace it. And what that's doing now is endangering the other half who are here, because this company can no longer fulfill their contracts. So this is having a real life effect. This is not a theoretical issue. And for those who oppose immigration, I just ask that, you realize, or at least start to envision yourself in this position as a real issue, a real on the boots ground issue. It's not necessarily just a theory between this is right and this is wrong. There is a compromise in the middle that we can reach as humans to deal with the problem that we have on hand today.
And so tell them a little bit, because there's some things that happened in the news recently, or happened in the court systems recently, related to DACA and immigration.
Well, the recent cases that came down from the Supreme Court, there's two cases that came down this week. The first case is about DACA. So there was a challenge in federal court to Trump's decision to end DACA, and it has been held by the federal courts that for the time being, they could still renew DACA. The other decision was about mandatory detention, and that's for people who have committed certain crimes. They are required to be detained, and oftentimes we try to get bond for these individuals because some of these crimes happened 20, 30 years ago, and we're trying to get periodic bond hearings. What the Supreme Court ruled is that no, that's not going to be allowed, and that they must be mandatorily detained. Those are the two things that came out this week from the Supreme Court.
Interesting. So on the bond part, these are crimes that they committed, and then somehow the system caught up with them, and that's why they're being detained. And what's the is it because they didn't serve their time for the crimes?
No. Time has been served for the most part. I mean, there's some individuals who are recently arrested, and as a result of that arrest, they subject themselves to mandatory detention. So those individuals will have to remain detained while their hearing goes on through the immigration court system. But we do have instances where people were detained because they try to file naturalization. Again, they try to do it the right way, and they got detained because the crime makes them removable under today's laws, and they have to remain detained while the immigration court hearing.
I want to wrap my head around this. It's a crime that they, and I'm generalizing, but let's say it's a crime that they served the time for. That still makes a difference and allows them to be detained for
immigration purposes, yes, because it's different, a different application of law.
And what does detained mean?
You're in jail.
Okay, so that's what I thought, but I didn't want to be presumptive because I actually didn't know. So you're in a regular prison. Okay.
Well, it's usually separated towards the immigration population. Okay. But what's funny about this is that most of those institutions are privately run companies, and they have their own quotas that they want to have heads on the beds to make sure that they remain a profitable industry.
Crazy. All right. How about when one of the big pictures when all of that went down about, I don't know if it's 6 months or 8 months ago, when people had flown and President Trump had done on Wednesday announced his new ruling, and on Friday when people were flying back in, they were detained at airports. You actually were part of that. So tell them a little bit about what's going on in that arena.
So the administration announced a travel ban from countries that are predominantly Muslim. They called it the Muslim travel ban. And what happened was that he announced it on Wednesday, didn't notify any of the agencies. There was a scramble as to how it was going to be implemented, and it was to be implemented immediately on Friday. And in the meantime, we had people who left the country to go visit their loved ones, and they were scheduled to come back. So on that Saturday, we had 3 individuals coming back from Syrian and Iranian descent coming back into the United States from a brief trip abroad. And they were detained for 6 hours. And during those 6 hours, it was unclear whether or not they would be released. Some of these were actual permanent residents.
I was going to ask you, so what allowed them to be detained? So they weren't undocumented, or were they undocumented?
No, they were absolutely documented. They were on a plane with their proper documents to be able to come back into the United States. But for the fact that the administration announced a travel ban, which, by the way, has been struck down by the federal courts because the architect of that travel ban went on TV and said that the purpose behind the travel ban was to restrict Muslims from entering the country. I mean, they cited the assistant's own words in striking down the federal court, the travel ban. So that's something. And one of these individuals who was coming back on that Saturday was a UCF student. with proper documentation. So we're not talking about somebody coming in here illegally. We're talking about someone who had everything in order, but because they were born in
of the
a certain
travel
country,
ban and because of the country they were born.
Because the country they were born was included in the travel ban.
Interesting.
So we were there at the airport, and we had a habeas corpus motions ready in case they were going to be detained. They were going to be continued to be detained, and then afterwards, when they were released, we have pictures of them, of the family, and you see the anguish on their face. And this is after they were released. Okay, so you can imagine what they were going through while they were detained. It was such a heart-wrenching moment there, and it's due to a lot of the policies that this administration
and
has
what
put
was
into place.
the point of the detainment? Were they going to ship them back? I'm trying to figure out, so you're detained, are they questioning them? I mean, they can obviously look up in a split second, like we all almost can, what your status is. So if they have permanent residency status, or they're here on a legit work visa, then what was the point? What are they doing during the detainment? And then what was the eventual outcome going to be?
Well, the purpose of the detainment was order from the President of the United States.
So just to sit there? Like, I'm trying to figure it out, like really dumb it down for me.
They were to be restricted from entering the United States. They were to be put on the next plane back. But there were immediate federal court challenges, and that came out the night before, and even that same morning that came out, that immediately put a halt to the travel ban. And that's when the 6 hours took place, and we were finally released.
Wow, yeah. And so how is the travel ban's been struck down, though, right?
Yes, it's been tried to be modified. It's still undergoing several court challenges, but they are, I believe, their third attempt to have a travel ban.
And what have you had to, you mentioned habeas corpus earlier, and I probably butchered that. You've had to utilize that for certain things regarding immigration.
Yeah, I mean, we have cases, for example, where we've actually won the case on appeal, no more appeals allowed, and the government still refuses to release the individual from detention, from jail. And so the only way that we were able to get them released is filing a habeas corpus motion in federal court to release the body. That's basically what it means. And we've had to have federal court orders for immigration to do that after winning the cases in immigration courts.
So it just sounds, I mean, our government is definitely well known for not one left hand not knowing what the other one does, and it's very difficult to maneuver through the system. I mean, you deal with it every day as an immigration attorney. I think all of us have experienced it on some level if you had to do anything with the government. But that must be crazy once you've already it's been ruled in your favor and you're still not able to get any action.
Yeah, I mean, we're high-fiving each other. I mean, we won this individual's right to go back to their family, and the government still wishes to have them detained after the individual has been detained for over a year. I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous what's going on right now.
So what, we're going to post all of Henry's information, his contact information, and so you can reach out to him. There's lots of comments, and Henry and I will both message you guys back, and I appreciate you guys being involved. I like it. I like that you asked questions and said some things, which is good. I want to talk about it. The whole point of this is to get it out and let's talk about it. It's not to say this person's wrong or that person's wrong. It's really to just educate, and that's what my goal was today. So anything that you want to leave them with about immigration, anything that you want to leave them with, maybe information they don't know or an insight that they don't have. I mean, I think your story is so powerful, and I really appreciate you sharing that. So anything you want to leave them with?
Yes, just if you are opposed to immigration, I just ask that you speak to an immigrant and have a civil conversation as to what that experience is actually like. It's like that saying, walk a mile in their shoes. Because what I find a lot is we have cases where the American has always been opposed to immigration, but one day they fall in love and they realize that this country's laws prevent them from being with the person they love. So I just ask that you keep an open mind and that you put yourself in the position of individuals, and that yes, while laws are laws, we can change those laws as well.
And I would add to that if you really, a little bit more on what Henry's saying, if you will just imagine that it's an individual, a human being, a friend of yours, a neighbor, and really think about the humanitarian way that you would treat that person, how you would want that person treated. And so if we could put more faces and individuals with it, I think people would be more responsive. But it's very easy to just say DACA and illegal immigrant, or not here and they're undocumented, bye. And you're not really personalizing that or humanizing it, because you don't have someone in your life that might have gone through that. And maybe that's because you haven't asked or they haven't shared it with you. But if you can put a real face, a human being, a friend, a loved one in that situation and want for them the best, that's really what we'd like to encourage you to do. You've been awesome today. Thank you so much. You guys have been awesome too. I appreciate all of your responses, and we will get to you. Happy Friday. We love you guys. All right, so have a good one. Mwah. All right, have a good one.